related issues. Our 5 thematic areas are data governance, internet freedom, civic participation, digital resilience, as well as digital inclusion. We do work, yes, in Eastern and Southern Africa, as well as other countries in the Sub-Saharan Africa. Most of you or some of you know us because of our FIFA Africa event, and this has nothing to do with football or soccer. This is the Forum for Internet Freedoms in Africa. We have this every year. Last year, we're in Dakar, Senegal, and this year we're going to be in Windhoek, Namibia, sometime in September. About the topic, today we are talking about Resolution 522, which is a guideline from the African Commission that specifically talks about protection of women in online spaces. When you talk about combating tech-facilitated gender-based violence, this cuts across not only for women, but also men. Everyone is a victim when it comes to tech-facilitated gender-based violence. And not to take more of the time with the introductions, I have to mention that CIPESA is well positioned to ensure Resolution 522 leads to concrete actions. We've been doing this, but also we've started conversations with you guys at this point, and we look forward to promoting this through policy advocacy, research, capacity building, and platform accountability. And we also pledge to turn commitments on paper into real-world protections for women facing online violence in Africa. Thank you very much, Rehana. I take this back to you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Patricia. I think you've sort of laid the foundation for what we're going to do. And I'm sure these are conversations we'll have at FIFA this year too. We'll kind of extend the conversation, I'm sure, especially when we start looking at tangible actions. So first of all, let me set the kind of some ground rules. If people have their cell phones, if they could just switch them off so that when you're speaking, they're not, that the interruptions are not coming through. Please, this is a conversation, so your participation will be really great. I see we have a huge turnout with 81 participants. So that's absolutely incredible. And, we appreciate that very much. For the speakers, when you see my screen and you see hands clapping, it's a way of saying, please, can you start winding up? Since I'm not in the physical space with you and I'm not able to do it in any other way, that I thought was the most polite way to do it. Before we go into the official part of the program, let's take you into this, into the afternoon's expectations. We're seeing an escalation in gender-based violence in the offline space, which is becoming more visible every day. And it's really highlighted in conflict zones, especially. I mean, you see Sudan, Ethiopia, DRC, and your Sahel region. At the same time, you see attacks on women in online spaces becoming increasingly aggressive, sexist, misogynistic. So it's a sort of cycle. And I think that as we're having this conversation, although our focus is on online spaces and Resolution 522 focuses on online spaces, it is a cycle and we have to see them together, in that kind of, circle. The aim and intent is very clear. It's to keep women on the periphery, to prevent them from being in spaces of influence and decision-making. And no matter how strong you are, how committed you are, these attacks have an impact, especially when you speak to the women. You understand that it really inhibits their participation. It restricts them to a certain extent. Even the strongest of women start thinking, okay, do I retreat? What do I do? How do I deal with this? So today we're going to dive into the African Commission on Human and People's Rights, Resolution 522, on the protection of women against digital violence in Africa. And what we really need, what I think I want everyone to understand is that we have to take note of and recognize that this is a groundbreaking document which has been crafted on our continent. There is no such instrument that zones in on technologically facilitated gender-based violence in this way. We should be proud of ourselves as the African continent. So we want to unpack how you take this soft law instrument that's on paper and connect it to the lived realities of women and their online attacks against them. We're also going to take time to think about solutions and how we can contribute to efforts to take the commitment off paper and translate it into action. So please, everyone, who's listening, who's a part of this, think of this as a conversation, and we look forward to everyone's valuable input, from comments to questions to ideas and solutions. I just want to check with Patricia and Asimwe. Is our first speaker here, the Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga?
She hasn't checked yet, but as soon as she does, we'll alert you.
Okay, so she was supposed to be our first speaker, giving the keynote address. Should I move on to the panel discussion then? Would that be?
Sure.
Okay. Sorry, if you just give me a minute. So our panel discussion this afternoon is to look at the implementation. How do we take, what's a soft law, and turn it into challenges and opportunities? And speaking to this, we have Lady Justice Monica Mugeni, Judge Supreme Court, Uganda, former principal of East African Court of Justice. And just to give you a little bit about her, she's a Ugandan lawyer and judge who on 17 January 2024 was appointed as a member of the Supreme Court of Uganda. Not a mean feat by any chance. Before that, from October 2019 until January 2024, she was a member of the Uganda Court of Appeals. Prior to that, she sat on the High Court of Uganda. Before her sort of rise to the bench, she was in private practice and had served as the manager of corporate services at the Uganda Road Fund, sorry, all the mistakes. She also previously worked in the Office of the Attorney General and the Privatization Unit. At the High Court, she was seconded to the East African Court of Justice, where she served as the principal judge. We also have Donald Dare, who is the Chief Executive Officer of the Pan-African Lawyers Union, a continental umbrella association of lawyers in Africa. He chairs the board of the Pan-African Citizens Association Network and of the International Coalition for the Responsibility to Protect, a global coalition of human rights activists. Over the last 20 years, he has led public interest advocacy and litigation to set norms on issues of constitutionalism, democracy, good governance, rule of law, promotion and protection of human rights, traditional justice, regional integration, continental unity, and international cooperation. Quite a list, as you can see. Lengiwe Dube, a fellow country person, is an expert on information rights, including freedom of expression, access to information, and data protection, complemented by strong expertise of technology's intersection with human rights. Currently, she is based at the Center for Human Rights, University of Protea, as a project manager of expression, information, and digital rights unit. Patricia, I've already introduced you to. So let's get into that discussion. And I'm going to kickstart it with, I know we have honorable guests, but Lengiwe, I know, has been involved in and knows the backstory rather well. So let me start off with you, Lengiwe. What was the motivation behind Resolution 522? What issues were you looking to address?
Thank you, Rihanna, and thank you to CPESA for organizing this. Before I start speaking, after how many minutes are you going to clap?
I'll give you a few minutes. When you see my hands clapping, Lengiwe, you know.
Rihanna and Lengiwe.
I'll try not to cut you off in the middle of things.
Rihanna and Lengiwe, my apologies. The Right Honorable Speaker has joined.
Okay.
Yes, Speaker Emeritus has joined us, and she has another meeting.
Shall we start? Okay. So we'll put that conversation on hold. Lengiwe will come back to you with the same question. Yes. Let's go to Right Honorable. Right Honorable Rebecca Kadaga is Ugandan lawyer and politician who served as Deputy Speaker of the Ugandan Parliament for 20 years. She holds a Master's of Arts in Women's Law. She currently serves as Uganda's first Deputy Prime Minister and concurrently as Minister for East African Community Affairs in the Ugandan cabinet. She's also the current Member of Parliament for the Kamuli District Women's Constituency. Welcome, and let's, get right into your presentation.
Trinity. Thank you very much for the opportunity. It's a pleasure to participate in this discussion, especially since the Resolution 522 has been put in place. I was just asking myself how many of our countries have actually domesticated or incorporated that resolution into their legislation, into their policies. Have they established frameworks for its implementation? Because lately, it is very clear that women have been targeted, especially in cyberbullying, morphing, etc. For instance, on X, there are constant, daily, every day, there are people that are trying to stop it. No one is asking the internet companies, why are you doing this? So I think that we need to pay more attention. We need to be more focused. And I was also looking at the legislation in order different countries. I think only 50% of our legislation deals with cyber harassment of women. So I think we are not paying enough attention to that. And I think I would like to see more effort by our governments and our legislatures in ensuring that there are more protections. But also, how is it being marketed to the population? How many of these poor women know that they can have access to redress? What is that redress? So I think these are some of the areas that I think we need to look at to ensure that our people are aware, they're able to access, and that the governments and other agencies are responsive to the issues that are affecting the women. I think for now, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Kadaga. I think you've raised two very important points, domestication and what form of redress that we have. So I think as we take it to the panel discussion, at some point we'll look into that issue as well. But thank you for joining us and raising those two very important issues. Hlengiwe, I think I've kind of introduced everyone. So can we kickstart with you with the very same question? What motivated Resolution 522? What was the intention behind it? I know that you were quite involved in that process.
Yes, thank you so much, Rihanna, and to the organizers. And this is an opportune time to have this kind of conversation just coming from International Women's Day. So just to reflect on the question that you have posed, Resolution 522. So Resolution 522 is on the protection of women against digital violence in Africa, and it was adopted in 2022. So now we are into the third year of that resolution. So yes, the question, what necessitated the resolution? As you know, this is a human rights issue, and our main instrument on human rights is the African Charter on Human and People's Rights, and it recognizes the rights of women under Article 18. And also stemming from the Charter, we have a protocol to the African Charter on the rights of women in Africa, popularly known as the Maputo Protocol. And the Maputo Protocol has provisions on gender-based violence that have, become like the reference point on, the agenda around combating gender-based violence on the continent and many others as well. So there's a wealth of instruments that are there which form part of the campaign against gender-based violence. And, the African Commission in 2019 came up with the Declaration of Principles on Freedom of Expression and Access to Information in Africa, which is one of those very progressive instruments on the continent on digital rights. If we look at the 2019 resolution in its preamble, it recognizes the other instruments, including the Maputo Protocol, and also under its general principles, it speaks to principles of non-discrimination, including issues of gender. And under Principle 7, it specifically talks about measures that have to be adopted by states to ensure that freedoms of expression and access to information are enjoyed by vulnerable and marginalized groups without discrimination. So they have to recognize the peculiarities of vulnerable and marginalized groups and adopt the appropriate measures. If you go down the declaration to Principle 42, Principle 42 speaks to protection of personal information and privacy issues. And under that principle, you would find also guidance to states on issues related to privacy, including issues related to non-consensual sharing of intimate images or sexually explicit content. And also, there have also been other important developments that took place that raise issues of technology-facilitated violence. Just to give an example of the Joint Declaration on Freedom of Expression and Gender Justice, and also, over the years, the commemorations of World Press Freedom Day have also highlighted issues of gender-based violence online. So based on some of these developments and some of these normative frameworks that that I've already mentioned, there was then a realization by the African Commission that beyond what is in the Maputo Protocol and what is in these other instruments, there was a need for the African Commission then to position itself in terms of responding to technology-facilitated violence. This also stemming from the realization that gender-based violence is now increasingly being realized happening in the online spaces as well. As we know how technology is fast changing our lives, it's also transferring issues of crime, issues of violence into the online space. So it was a time for the African Commission to position itself in that regard, and by adopting a resolution, which is the position of the African Commission on tackling gender-based violence in digital spaces. Then this led to the resolution that we have today, Resolution 522, which basically is saying that, yes, we have a movement which is taking place on gender-based violence, but let's amplify, our efforts by looking into how this violence has pivoted to the digital age and identify, the forms of violence, how it manifests in the online space, the manifestations like, your harassment, your cyberstalking, your cyberbullying, invasions into the private lives of people who exactly, is disproportionately affected in this regard. So, the idea was to put together this resolution, which would then guide the subsequent processes as per the mandate of the African Commission on addressing gender-based violence, because there was this tendency of addressing gender-based violence issues without really being very intentional about, gender-based violence in the online spaces or in the virtual spaces that are necessitated by, how we are increasingly using technologies. So the Commission then adopted that resolution, and then subsequent to the resolution, the Commission, I don't know if I can speak about it then, that it adopted another resolution which mandates it to undertake a study continental study on the manifestations of gender-based violence online, and that is
So
the stage in
maybe
which the
on that one,
committee is
shall we
right
wait
now.
on that one? I do think it's very important, but I think
Okay.
we'll bring it into the,
Pack it. Okay.
we pack it and sort of talk to it a bit later. Yeah.
Yes. So that
Yeah.
was the background essentially. I'll speak to the other issues at the appropriate time.
No problem. Okay, in the chat, there's two questions from panelists, and it talks to about it. There's one question asking that who is this for? Is it for women in urban areas and urban contexts, or for women in rural areas too? And also, how do you, where there's not much digital technology, how do you make it applicable to women in rural areas? So I'm going to disagree slightly. If we all know that on the African continent, there's a lot of use of WhatsApp, and it's very far-reaching, okay? And gender-based violence online takes on many different forms, including what Lengiwe referred to, which was the non-consensual sharing of intimate images. And that seems to affect many women right across the board, okay? There's also the cyberbullying, when you are in chat groups, and I know very well from an example for myself on a journalist chat group, and there's a domination of male voices, and a lot of misogynistic and very offensive remarks are made against women. So I think this is something that really affects every sort of sector of society and in every area. So I'm going to pose the question to Lady Justice Monica Mogeni and to Donald Dare, but we'll start off with Lady Justice Mogeni. It's something on paper which then has to be translated to the lived realities of women. How do you see that, where do you see the judiciary or, coming into that process? And what is it like for them? And what can we do? What can we do as CSOs, as citizens, to make that to facilitate that process? Because at the end of the day, one of the things we have to do is take action. And that is going to be in the legal arena.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. I'm delighted to be here. Glad to see Donald Dare again. He used to appear before me in the East African Court of Justice. Well, I'll get into the subject now. So hi, Donald. Cyberbullying, because that's what it really is. It is online bullying. It's the demeaning of women, whichever way you want to look at it, whether it's the rural woman or the urban woman. I think it manifests across board. And once we are clear on that, then it will sort of give us an idea what action needs to be taken. However, before I respond directly to the question on the judiciary, I wanted to give some context. The judiciary has been socialized and professionalized to sort of have a thick skin. You go out there, listen to cases, whichever way the case goes. Once you've delivered your decision, you develop a thick skin around you, and whatever feedback comes about this decision, you're sort of prepared for it. You're telling yourself, whoever won is pretty happy, but the person that did not win cannot be happy. So you expect that backlash. And because of that, there is a thin divide between what we in the judiciary consider constructive criticism, expected criticism, criticism that comes within the territory of the job, and what then strays into the area of gender bullying, cyberbullying, tech-related gender violence. What we are increasingly seeing is a case where both women and male judges are attacked in online spaces. However, the sense that I get is we are sort of stripping back to the situation we had before, where when men see women attempting, in their view, to dominate the online spaces, it's not taken kindly. So the attacks on men will probably be sort of gentler. We recently had an attack on the director of public prosecutions, and it could not have gotten as more brazen than it was. It went really sexist and in a very bizarre manner, the sort of thing that you won't necessarily see for a male judge, because she is a judge. Now, what do we expect? What do we in the judiciary think should happen? I think we should approach this from a broad perspective. We should bear in mind the sort of categories of women that will be targets. The first category, in my view, is the category in the formal sector, in the business sector. Perhaps they are employed somewhere, and in a bid to control their progression, their career progression, these attacks will come up, especially where a woman is strongly positioned to move forward. She is likely to be a target for these attacks. The second category, of course, is the informal sector. I do not agree with the person that said the informal sector is not susceptible to these attacks. I think they are. I think, as you said, everybody is engaged in WhatsApp at least. Most people have phones that can receive explicit, all this sort of explicit material. Now, in the informal sector, you can't rule out, I'm going to be very candid. A lady is involved in a sexual relationship with a male. When the relationship goes south, for whatever reason, whether it is control or otherwise, this male could post all sorts of material on internet. That's one aspect of it. Then secondly, there are ladies in the informal sector who are embroiled in relationships, which comes back down to control again, where a male wants to be in a position of dominance and perhaps would not want her to aspire for better. Because we have young girls and perhaps people that are not yet in leadership or in these professional spaces who are aspiring to get there. But there is a male somewhere, there's a male somewhere who thinks they shouldn't quite occupy these spaces, who thinks they are competition for them in those spaces. Men tend to be more aggressive. So the inclination is suppress this person, and what better way than post this sort of material? And when it comes to what they call these stereotypes that are created about these women, they'll create a persona around you like you're a difficult person, you're a brazen person, simply because a woman is trying to speak out. So this is the holistic group of women that we are dealing with. How do we target each specific group? In my view, we should be tailoring our message in different tranches. I think we should have tranches for the professional type, tranches for those in the formal sector because they relate to this cyberbullying differently. And then tranches for the young girls, those perhaps still in higher levels of education or younger, tranches for the informal sector, tranches for the woman out there that is simply trying to survive and will do whatever she can, put food on the table of her children. The messages should be tailored to reach these target groups differently and perhaps in their spaces. Now, once that has been done, in the judiciary, bottom line is, would like to have a law to implement. We cannot be talking about, we could sort of try to absorb it in gender-based violence and have it as a criminal offense. But I think it's always better when it is targeted, it is specific, and we have specific ingredients that we're working with. For instance, if you're going to call it shoaling or say, let's say, cyberbullying, what are the ingredients of cyberbullying? What are the specific ingredients we should be looking out for? Do we contextualize them further for the employment sector? Do we contextualize them further for the business sector? Do we contextualize them further for the informal sector? But there must be some sort of ingredients that the judiciary would be looking at. And the beauty with these ingredients is that once you have it clearly defined, the likelihood of convictions goes up. And once you have one or two convictions, then men are aware, or women who are strolling the men are also aware. Each gender is aware that this has implications. And I think that's what we're trying to do. What we're trying to do is send a message that what you do online, which tries to demean another person, does have repercussions. How best do we have these repercussions felt? By having specific laws that address them in a specific manner, and in that sense, attracts punitive action. So that would be my take on that from the judiciary's perspective.
Thank you. And Donald, your thoughts on this?
Yeah, thank you very much, Rehana, our moderator. And nice to see you also, Lady Justice Mugenyi. And I'd like to build from where Lady Justice Mugenyi has stopped, but I'd like to take a bit of a detour first. In this sense, that to a person with a hammer, every problem is a nail. And anytime you ask a lawyer or a judge an issue, we are quick to run to what the law should do, how the law should be applied. And that's very important, and I'll come to that. But I'd like to go back to the resolution itself. And when you look at its operative part, which has about 9 clauses, one of the recommendations or one of the lines of action that it calls upon the states to do at paragraph 7 is to implement victim-friendly and gender-sensitive policies when handling cases of digital violence against women. And I'd like to lean heavily on the word policy, because policy could even be unwritten. In the instance in which Lady Justice Mugenyi has talked about where the Director of Public Prosecutions in Uganda late last year was shamed in a very graphic and horrific manner. That shaming, I'm sorry to say, came from the highest levels of the legal profession, from the sitting president of the Law Society. And we've seen similar shaming in Kenya, for instance, of the Chief Justice, who happens to be a woman, the first woman Chief Justice in Kenya. And it's coming from former presidents of the bar, and so on. And we've seen the same happening to, people right from the grassroots level all the way to apex levels. So I think much as we can also rely on the law, I think as a society, we should also, prioritize, we should also emphasize a policy of condemning loudly such people and such acts. So let's not focus on the law, and we will come to the law, but it would help a lot. And in the case of the DPP of Uganda, several senior lawyers from Uganda and from the rest of the region, including the Pan-African Lawyers Union, had to come out and condemn, so that we call attention to the thing, and we call especially leaders, political leaders, bureaucratic leaders, civic leaders, bar leaders, and other actors that you cannot do this, that it is shameful to do this. So let's not underrate the importance of public condemnation and public censure. And especially if we would see our senior leaders do that, it would probably be able to send a message to the public. Having said that, I agree very much that in the context of implementing that resolution 522, like Lady Justice Mugenyi said, we need to go back and audit the laws on cyberspace that we have and see how we can refine them so that the crimes are defined clearly and it is easy to investigate, to prosecute, and to convict when it is proven. So it's very important that we look at the hard letter of the law, but many times these things come under rules and regulations made by the minister under the law. So it is very important, in my view, to audit that. And then also to see whether there is scope or there is ability to look for summary procedures or expedited procedures, such that once the elements of the crime have been proved, we can move very fast. Because like with all other crimes which are gender-based, violence-based, many times having the complainant having to undergo again to narrate to a court or to a tribunal, because it could even be under, for instance, a tribunal under the Cyber Act or a tribunal of the National Human Rights Institution, having to re-narrate what happened to them can itself be traumatizing. So it's very good to look at summary and expedited procedures there. And when we talk about law, and again relying on the incident that Lady Justice Mugenyi has brought about, we should then look at other institutions. For instance, professional institutions which have codes of ethics. How do we re-audit or look at our codes of ethics so that we ensure that even there, we do create the crime or the professional infraction of a member of a profession. Could be a lawyer, could be a doctor, could be an engineer, could be a journalist, and so on. Like, I think what you're saying, Rihanna, that how do our codes of ethics capture this, or the rules of procedure of our various associational life? So I think there could be quite an agenda, and many people are implicated, and not just the state, in terms of what we can do to address this scourge. Thank you.
Thank you very much. You've both given us a lot of food for thought. Let me just round it up while panelists are listening. You're saying let's just not confine action to the state, so in terms of a law. In fact, you're saying let's start off at public censure, call it out for what it is. It's morally reprehensible behavior, right? And you said we can start at, so it's almost a grassroots level kind of, action to take, which can be taken by anyone really in a position of, authority and integrity, right? You're looking at people with gravitas, okay? Then you're saying that, look, let's do an audit of what's in existence right now in terms of how people are taken care of, and, then implement what is necessary. You're also talking about an expedited process. Whatever we do then adopt, it should be a fast and speedy process, because you're right. I think there is a struggle when people have to re-narrate, and, it's very traumatic and it's very triggering, to go through the process again. Let's look at gender sensitive policies. And okay, the other, I think, the other things that were being said, sorry if I can think, I'm just trying to get myself here in order. And Justice Mugenyi, I think you talked about, look, there's so many different types of gender-based violence. We have to be very specific. We have to define it very clearly. And even when we're messaging it, we should be we should be tailoring our message in a very targeted, specific way. And that should actually translate onto paper in terms of legal redress. And I hope I'm getting that correct in terms of summarizing that. Yes?
Yes, Rihanna, you are.
Good. Okay, so then my question to Langiwe and maybe even Patricia is, right, these are the recommendations, the lived reality of women and what they have to go through. And again, yes, it happens to both men and women, but it takes on very different tones when it is addressed against women. So maybe Langiwe and Patricia, you can come in here. How do we take the lived reality and now translate it into something more concrete based on what the two panelists have just, sort of outlined in terms of what we can do? Patricia, maybe I can kick off with you, and then Langiwe, you can talk about that and also talk about the other resolution.
Thank you, Rihanna. And in bridging policy to reality, Lady Justice talked about having to define this and add it in the different laws. For a case of Uganda, at CIPESA with partners, we've gone ahead to have conversations with the Parliament of Uganda, in particularly the committees on legal and parliamentary affairs, as well as gender, pushing for the sexual offences bill. We provided language, and we sort of fleshed out the part of tech-facilitated gender-based violence. We brought up words like voyeurism, where someone can take a video of you with in mind, to use such a clip for sexual purposes and, like a pervert sort of way. And we do hope and wish that the bill includes that, and it has passed. It's a bill that has been vetoed back and forth. This is, I think it's second rodeo before Parliament, but there is a hand from Lady Justice. If I may. No, it's a mistake. Okay. I thought you wanted to add to what I was
after you're done. I'm not interrupting. It's after you're done.
Okay, thank you, Honorable. So we do hope that our submissions are taken forward, and tech-facilitated gender-based violence is included under the Sexual Offences Bill 24. And the other part that, on the case of civil society, is how do we hold intermediaries accountable? And intermediaries, I'm talking about Meta, Google, Microsoft, because in the end, we're using their platforms, right? And it's such a shocker or a blowing part of things that Meta recently decided to abandon the fact-checking component of their work on the continent. And that already puts everything that we are working, towards at a whole nother different snowballs. Because if we did have fact-checking promoted and facilitated at all levels on these platforms, in a way, women are protected, not only women, but also men, because fact-checking is very important. If you're able to flag some words or some pictures to be violating someone's rights, it helps, it's one way of countering tech-facilitated gender-based violence. But then Facebook or Meta decided to pull back, and with CPESA, we've also done some research piece on that. I'll share it in the link for people to look at. So it's a point of what do we do and what can governments in Africa do, since now the intermediaries have decided to just open these platforms without thinking about our rights. Thank you.
Thanks, Patricia. And before Justice Mugeni comes in, we've actually got a question from Carol Ndosi saying, look, we run a helpline on online gender-based violence and technologically facilitated gender-based violence. And it's been a challenge pushing for tech accountability, especially since Elon Musk took over, and there's more and taking down abusive content. How do we push for more tech accountability where national laws are not quite clear on the crimes and hence might not get government backing in escalation? And I think, Justice Mugeni, I think when you wanted to interrupt, you wanted to respond to something like that, I'm sure.
Yes, very related. I heard Patricia talk about policy engagement with Parliament, the link between policy and reality. And to my mind, what comes foremost to my mind is, do we have prosecutors who are technically astute and able to sort of look through this technical stuff and translate it into a prosecution? That's one angle of it. But what perturbs me more is usually, more often than not, when this material is put out there, once you get a public outcry, it's pulled down. So when you go back to look for it, it's no longer available. However, the technocrats, the IT specialists, know how to get in there and sort of recover whatever needs to be recovered. The question is, are the people that are going to prosecute these wrongdoers able to navigate these sort of spaces efficiently? Because if they can't do that, once you lose it, once it's pulled down, then somebody's walking off scot-free for something that he should be penalized for. So I'm thinking, train the prosecutors. I recall attending some training in the US at some point, when I was in the criminal law division, and it was about cybercrime and how to fight it. And it's a whole technical area. There are certain things that you need to look out for. There are certain indicators, even when a document has been pulled down, and these are things that technocrats need to be trained in. At that time, the thinking was start with the judges, but the judges won't manufacture the evidence. The person that presents the evidence should be able to look out for the indicators that need to be looked out for. So I'm thinking, engage the legislators. They are the ones that formulate the law. Engage the departments that feed into this law. For instance, the prosecutors and the IT specialists, communications house. Get to know who and what they need to look out for. And once this has been done, identify specialist prosecutors who can run with the show. And that's a sort of realistic way to start and hopefully get tangible results.
No, thank you for that. Yeah, thank you for that. Hlengiwe, actually, this is a perfect opportunity for you to come in, because I know that to a certain extent, Center for Human Rights really looks into those kind of workshops and, facilitating those discussions, especially with the legislators and the judiciary. And even to a certain extent, I would say the lawyers who are going to defend you, if I'm correct. Is that, yeah? Over to you,
Should I go for it? Oh, okay, thank you very much. So just before I get into it, I just want to also reiterate that, you know, the purpose of the resolution was to sort of craft a framework of tackling, you know, gender-based violence online. So just providing for that basis and, you know, identifying what exactly, you know, we are talking about, what are the issues. And in that regard, really taking into account, just looking at the legal framework that we have on the continent, I think there is an acknowledgement in the resolution that there are gaps as far as our legal framework is concerned. And you would see as part of their recommendations that there is need to take stock really into what we have in terms of our legislation, and try to answer your question around like what can be done practically. That taking stock of our legislative framework, you know, legal framework is very important to see if you have a gender-based violence act, for instance, and looking at that kind of legislation and see the extent to which it can adequately or effectively respond or be used, you know, in terms of tackling issues of the online space. And, you know, the laws that are coming up now, we have cybercrime laws, we have all manner of laws that speak to the technology or the digital world. To what extent can we take advantage of these new pieces of legislation to mainstream issues of gender-based violence online? I'll give an example of what South Africa has done in terms of their cybercrime law. They have criminalized non-consensual sharing of intimate images. So that is considered a cybercrime, and that is, you know, legislated. It's there in the provisions of that law. But you will look at other, you know, pieces of legislation or other cybercrime laws in other countries. They don't have that kind of framing. But that's what South Africa has done in that regard. And the other thing that the resolution mentions that the judge, you know, has just referred to, the issue of training, which I think is very important. Just last month or from January, there is a case which is going on in South Africa against a very senior judge. You know, the judge president of the Eastern Cape in South Africa. It's about sexual harassment in the workplace. But these messages were being sent to a junior member of the court through WhatsApp, the WhatsApp platform. And the tribunal it happens live, you know, on all platforms. You see it on YouTube, and they are going into analyzing even the emojis, you know, that were sent by the judge and vice versa to that. And I was asking myself that, you know, the judge is on this platform on WhatsApp, and they are using it in this manner. Now there's a case against them, and you know, all that. So this, you know, it's happening on those platforms. So my question was around the issues of, these are the same people that have to preside over, you know, these cases that are brought before them. So just to underscore the issue of training, whether it's the, you know, the lawyers or the prosecutors, even just the law enforcement. You are looking at a situation where you go to a police station, you report on these issues, and you are confronted with a situation where maybe they even laugh at you. You know, the laugh at the victim, you know, on the issues, especially when you're talking about non-consensual sharing of intimate images, you know, start being, you know, interrogated, maybe in front of everyone. How do the law enforcement agents also respond, you know, to issues of gender-based violence online in a dignified manner? But also, really, we are facing generally in the human rights spectrum the issue of just awareness around human rights issues. So the resolution also raises that issue of, you know, raising awareness on just gender-based violence, but also, you know, now with the digital angle. And there are organizations, you know, like us and others who conduct this kind of trainings. And I think we need to do more of this, because there are many people out there who actually don't know that they are victims, of gender-based violence in this way, who don't know that, their, privacy, what does it mean to have, privacy violated in the digital space, all those things like doxing, how, unpacking all that for the benefit of the public. That is actually making, this conversation practical. How does it work for an ordinary person beyond yourself working at CPESA, who is an expert in this person? If you go to somebody who is a vendor, an ordinary person, how do you make them understand, issues of just navigating the digital space to the extent that they will also understand even better? I see, Rihanna, you're coming when when they've been violated in that space. But other important issue to mention is the role of the media. The media is there to educate, is there to inform. Is our media well equipped or well informed to educate the public, or to provide a platform for conversations such as this? Because at the end of the day, we want this resolution not to be something for just experts working on digital rights, but we want it to be for a general person, because we are all not all of us, but there is now increasingly many people that are using these spaces, and one way or the other, it's it's something that can happen to anyone. Hence the need to know how to recognize when someone has been violated online, and also to take advantage of some of the measures of recourse options that are available. And in terms of the next resolution, briefly, so after 522, the resolution, the Commission then adopted a resolution to undertake a continental study. So the continental study is basically for the Commission to scan through, the continent to see how is gender-based violence manifesting, what are the different forms, in terms of legislation, what is out there, and so that, that can then inform a set of very comprehensive or actionable recommendations that the Commission can then use in terms of advocacy, in terms of framing, maybe the requisite normative standards. So at the moment, that process is ongoing, and the Center for Human Rights, together with Equality Now, are the ones that are providing that technical support to the African Commission to facilitate the continental study. We've already received very good reports from the consultants, and is being undertaken at on a regional basis, Southern Africa, West Africa, North Africa, East Africa. So we now have we are in that process where we've received the drafts, and we are at the review stage. And these will be subjected to review also by stakeholders as well. So we'll be reaching out for your input, because there is work that you are already doing in this particular area. And this will be an opportunity for the stakeholders working in this area to also contribute to the studies at the appropriate time. And we'll definitely be reaching out, and you'll be in a position to contribute in that regard. Thank you.
So you've actually set up the stage for the next question, and this is to everyone. This is to all the panelists, how do we harness that research, the advocacy, the programming, the communication by the different partners, something tangible. We know we've got to do it. You've mentioned that, Lengiwe. I think to a certain extent, Lady Justice Mugenyi also talked about it. So how do we synthesize all that? Where's the place in which to do it? Let's just brainstorm. I know right now we won't get the answers, but it's to start that conversation. So start off with Donald. You had some great ideas. Then we'll move on to Lady Justice Mugenyi, and then Patricia and Lengiwe. Lengiwe, to a certain extent, you've already said that you've got something in the pipeline. So that could be one of the initiatives where we can get stakeholders. But are there any other ideas?
Yes, I think so. I think Lengiwe has already said a lot. The one thing that I'd like to urge, especially the participants, to bear in mind, that the norm setting at regional levels and at continental levels are not ends in themselves. Because sometimes we may pat ourselves on the back when we've done this work and produced the reports and produced the general comments and produced the resolutions and so on at regional, continental, international level. But the most important action is always at the national level. It's at the national level where human beings live. They don't live somewhere in the middle of the air called the East African Community. So I think it's very important when we get results or products such as those that Lengiwe has just talked about, how we convene at the national level. So I'd really, really urge stakeholders to think, can we have convenings at the national level where we disseminate this to a range of stakeholders, especially the key stakeholders? Lady Justice Mugenyi was already talking about the judiciary as an important actor, but also the office of the prosecutor as an important actor, and also the investigators. Part of the best practice recommendations we're getting now is that each of these institutions, especially the investigators and the prosecutors, should have dedicated cybercrime and cybersecurity units. So these are very important stakeholders to bring on board. And then, of course, also the leadership of the media and leadership of society. So I just really urge, because I see we come from several countries here on the call. I can see from the almost 90 people on the call, that let's begin envisaging how at the national level, we will call the relevant stakeholders and try and disseminate what is coming out and customize it to our local situations. In many countries now, we do have data protection offices as a separate entity. The National Human Rights Institution is always a very important institute. We do have, in many countries, some transitional justice process or other going on. And this is a very good environment in which to discuss, especially TFGBV that is related to the conflicts going on in our country, that's related to people who are activists for democracy, for good governance, for human and people's rights. So for me, domestication is a key. And the first step, in my view, is dissemination and local level conversations. Thanks.
Thanks, Donald. You raise a very important point. It's taking regional instruments and then bringing them to national level is where part of the issue is. And I know that many organizations in my country, in Zimbabwe, have tried very hard. And I think it's the same across the continent. I think there's been an attempt, but Resolution 522 is not that well known, even when it's taken down to national level. But you're right. And I think the key player in it is the media. Moving on to Lady Justice Mugenyi.
Thank you, Rihanna. I'd like to start perhaps from the top and say sometimes it helps when the repercussions of an action are sort of flagged and get stakeholders to realize how serious the issue is. So in this case, we are increasingly seeing a very strong correlation between cyberstalking, for instance, and murder. Many of female-based murders have a history in a lot of cyberstalking, cyber harassment, and all the indicators are this murder is often related to what has been happening to the woman. So once we flag that out to the national leaders and say there is a very strong correlation between these three, it will interest them in the subject of Resolution 522. So that's the starting point. Then secondly, I agree with both Lengiwe and Donald when they say we need to engage in terms of the infrastructure that's already in place and simply build upon that. In Uganda, we have what we call the justice, law, and order sector, which combines the judiciary, the prosecutors, prisons department, investigators, CID, all these come together in the justice, law, and order sector. So at policy level, it would be important to get the buy-in of this sort of a body in order to get them moving, get the entire process moving. Finally, as far as I'm concerned, criminal law, the criminal law space, the digital law space, and the physical criminal law space are fairly intertwined. We can't run away from the fact that most physical crime is linked to digital space. So let's keep going. Let's not give up. Let's keep taking it one step at a time, engage the politicians. That is where it often usually starts.
Thank you. Thengiwe, and then Patricia.
Thank you so much. So for me, I just want to mention another, intervention, which I believe is very important. Because this resolution just doesn't look at older women, only or mature, I don't know if I can use that word, mature women, but there's also an issue of girls, you find they're using these platforms, especially TikTok and the other platforms that they can use. So I think in terms of intervention, really, the issue of educating them whilst they are still young, because these are, young girls that are going to grow into women later on. There are certain violations that can affect them, and this can even have an impact on their lives going forward. So recently we had a conversation here in South Africa around how the Department of Education can be involved in educating children as part of the school curriculum. So there is one of the subjects that is offered called life orientation, and there is already that discussion to mainstream issues of the online space into that curriculum, so that children also, as they are navigating the digital space and they are, graduating into adulthood, they have already had some kind of training at school, and that becomes like, something normalized even in the school system, because they are the future and all that. So as I close, I just want to say that this resolution is, let it not just be an abstract document or an instrument. Let it cascade down to, it's now at the African Commission level. What does it mean, at the regional, sub-regional level, at, national level? And as you look into your organization as well, maybe in institutional level, what does that mean for an institution up to the level of, an ordinary person or an individual? I think we should look at it that way. And, we thank the Commission for having initiated the process, but we are hoping that this is a process that is going to cascade down, to everybody, because as I said, we are in the digital age, it's not going anywhere. It could be your neighbor, it could be yourself, it could be your child, it could be your wife. Anyone and everyone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lengiwe. Actually, I'm going to relate a story which makes it very real and you raised a very important point about, it affects young people too. Very recently, there was a case in one of the schools here where one of the students, a male student, was actually suspended. And I thought it was very weak action taken for what he had done. And basically, he had cyberbullied a young woman, student, fellow student. And basically, it was around the objectification, you look like this, you should just, and was pushing her to commit suicide based on what she looked like and how she was interacting with the world. And it was very, very, misogynistic, very patriarchal. And yes, it does start from there. So, as we've had, participants ask questions, I do think you start to understand that it really affects the array of women across the board, across ages, across, your structural societal settings, all of that. And I think that's what we need to understand. And you're right, we do have to thank the ACHPR for this resolution. It is the only one of its kind globally. And it was crafted here in this part of the world. And I think that's something we should always be raising the mantle about. Yeah. Patricia, on to you. About harnessing all of the stakeholders, harnessing all of this energy and this action. How do we do it effectively?
The thing with speaking last, you end up repeating what everybody else has said. So yeah, true. While the Resolution 522 sets a very important precedent, Achieving the real change requires legal reforms, as we've talked about, enforcement, platform accountability, and we've also noted the fact that of recent, we've lost the part of fact-checking. That is something that we could also look into and see how at national level we could support ourselves, as well as victim support and public awareness. Lady Justice talked about the issue of capacity building at the level of like training prosecutors. Do they actually know how to deal with this? And this is an issue that actually came up when we had conversations at the parliamentary level, the capacity of the DPP to do this kind of work. CIPESA, as we speak, we do have a team in Kigali. We had a training with the judges of the East African Court of Justice on data protection, but it's not enough. You know, it is a very continuing and volatile area. And we've also had some trainings with the NetPIL. This is the network for public interest lawyers. Most of them are in Uganda, and it's always like a very engaging conversation, and we could do more on that, because in the end, it does not really help if we do train the judges and then the guys that are, you know, doing and representing these people are not having the much knowledge that they need to have. And also the issue of having like real, you know, the outcomes for such atrocities to be like a very good examples in a sort of like deterrence, you know. So there is more to do, and by way of integrating these measures, we can sort of close the gap between policy and the lived experiences of women facing online violence. Thank you. Rehan, I think you're muted, but I can see your lips moving. That's what...
Yeah, you're right. I was muted. I'm not even going to try and attempt to ask another question because, you know, I think we'll then go over 1 hour, 1.5 hour slotted time. I think this has been an amazingly enriching discussion. A lot of ideas have come out of it. We can see, you know, some of the things to prioritize is, you know, taking stock, doing an audit of what is there, what's in existence in terms of, and I think it's not just your legal framework, it's what's in place, you know, the helplines. There's so many initiatives, and I don't think we're aware of them at a continental level, and it's something that can be shared, yeah? So I think that's definitely a first port of call. The other thing is being very definitive about the online crimes and unpacking them, and so that even when you do the training, it's a lot easier to do the training when you have very clear definitions, and they kind of, you know, vary at the stage. And there's been so many online based violations that we really do need to classify them. And, you know, I loved Donald's idea of, look, you start at public level. You start at, you know, people with gravitas and integrity calling out bad behavior, especially, you know, when it is committed by so-called, you know, professional people, because we kind of have this notion that, look, you know, if you're in a certain field, in the legal field, you're not going to commit a crime like this, but you do. So, you know, that's very important. So moving on from there, Patricia, I think you can sort of, you know, conclude all of this by telling us about the petition that CIPESA is driving, and, you know, letting us know more about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Renania. We do have a hand in the attendees. I don't know if we can get that person. Is it Tomiwa Lori?
Oh, Tomiwa, good to have you on board.
Yes. Hi, Rihanna. Hi, everyone. Hi. It's a pleasure to be here and listening to the brilliant submissions. Just to quickly add that, speaking of what's in place, and also linking that to what the Honorable Judge had said earlier regarding some mechanism in Uganda that brings the justice sector actors together. I just wanted to flag that a similar mechanism also exists constitutionally established in Kenya, called the National Council on the Administration of Justice. So maybe this could also give us some ideas about how we can collaborate in, for example, in Kenya, and possibly also cross-country ideas in implementing the resolution. Otherwise, it's been a wonderful conversation. Thank you very much for organizing this. Yeah, thank you.
So, Tomire, you're almost saying, well, I can take it up from where Donald was saying, look, let's start at national level. So I think if we did that audit at national level, you know, what initiatives are in place, what legislation is in place, and we then did it as a continental thing, you know, CPESA, you know, your research does involve continental work. So this is something that I think these are all actions that we can take. And I think they're very concrete, very tangible things that come out of the resolution and what the resolution is actually asking for. And on that note, again, Patricia, if you could talk about your petition.
Yeah, I'll talk about the petition. I see Gladys Mbuya also, there is a hand up, but we have...
No, I can't seem to see them. I wonder what it is. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you so much for giving me the floor, Patricia, and I'm so happy to be part of this meeting. I'm so sorry because of mix-up. I joined the meeting a bit late, so if I repeat what had been said, please bear with me. I just want to raise the issue that I think every effort geared towards combating cyberbullying, cyberstalking, or cyber violence should take into consideration the issue of jurisdiction. Because I've had a lot of challenges trying to litigate such cases, and you hear things like somebody sits in another country, let's say in the UK, and is actually bullying another woman in another country, and you take this case to court, they'll tell you that the court does not have jurisdiction because that person was in the UK and the other person is in Nigeria. So I think this is a big challenge because I believe that we can actually use the law and the law courts to fight this terrible evil, because to me it's a terrible thing. But if we don't look at this issue of jurisdiction, personally I believe that cyberspace should have no limit in jurisdiction. So I just want to say that every effort, even the African Union should think about this. Every effort should look at this issue of jurisdiction so much. Otherwise, our efforts will be almost in vain. Thank you so much.
Thank you for that very important point. That's the thing, you know, we talk about the reach. What digital disruption has done, it's increased the reach, and you're right, you know. And I guess many of us hadn't thought about jurisdiction, but so it's great that you've raised this point, and it's something that should be considered as we move forward. Thank you.
All right, Rihanna, yes, thank you. To talk about the petition, we do have a link in the chat, and we are only 3 signatures away to close this because we are looking forward to a 25 max next goal. So please look at it, sign it, because it does wrap up this session and it has more information as to why we decided to have this conversation and also the lineup of the people that you've heard from. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Patricia, to all the panelists. It's been one of the most invigorating discussions I've had this year, and so interesting. And also to have people from the judiciary, because, you know, then you have a conversation that really takes on a different tone. You know, we hear so much from people who face online violence, but we don't hear very much from the people who have to prosecute these crimes. So getting their perspective was very interesting. Thanks to CPESA. Really appreciate, you know, the fact that there was this time and space created for this kind of conversation. And to all the panel, to the participants who joined us, I hope it's been enlightening for them. And I hope that it has contributed to us getting ideas on more tangible things that we can, you know, participate in or activate as CSOs, as you know, the judiciary and as legislators. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rihanna. Thank you so much, our panelists for today. On behalf of CIPESA, I would like to appreciate everyone that has been able to join us. We will continue with the discussion. Follow us on our Twitter at CIPESA UG. We will also have this conversation going on. Our research, the blog is posted already. Please do not hesitate to visit our social media platforms and the website to know what is happening. To Right Honorable Rebecca Alitwala Kadaga, who logged out earlier on, she asked that she will get in touch with us. We will certainly put together what has come out today and do share with her and take an advantage of the fact that she sits in the Council of Ministers of the East African community and see how this conversation can go further. To everyone on the call, Lady Justice Monica, certainly the conversation doesn't stop here. We do hope to continue engaging you on how to proceed, how to take on the judiciary together with you. On behalf of CIPESA, I would like to wish you a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you.